China is so brazen. And as I say, what they do is try to flood the zone of the country that they're trying to influence. So even with those prosecutions in the United States, they now have none other than the New York Times reported on a pop-up service station in New York City run by a local gangster. So China won't stop. At least in the US, they're hitting that whack-a-mole with a few hammers.
Bad guys, let's talk about the bad guys, because for the longest time, you weren't allowed to question the influence that the People's Republic of China has in Canada. I mean, you were called racist if you did. You were said to be challenging the loyalty of Chinese Canadians. Ironically, a lot of the victims of the People's Republic of China or the Chinese Communist Party are Chinese Canadians as well, those who are maybe more freedom-oriented, more democracy-oriented, or simply that don't want to be in under control of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Tell me a little bit about your work on Chinese government shenanigans, and that's a very lighthearted word because it's actually deadly serious. Tell us a little bit of the state of the art of Chinese interference in Canadian democracy.
Well, really, if you talk to people on the inside that know, so that would be some people well placed in police, some people well placed in intelligence, both in Canada and the United States. The influence of China in Canada really, it knows no bounds. It is the image in my mind is if we're looking at Canada as a jungle, the jungle grass covers the whole nation, and China sort of has these influence networks. Speaking to your point, very unfortunately, they have the capacity to control whole communities, and they do it by essentially gaining influence with the wealthier members of the communities, many of them that unfortunately have gotten wealthy in illicit means. And that leaves the vast majority of the community, the great, honest, amazing people that have fled a thuggish regime, fearing that they're under attack, essentially, from very wealthy and dangerous people with really pretty much overt connections to China, what it calls its United Front Work Department. And that brings me to the nub here. That's the story of the whole election interference scandal that I broke. It's the story of the Chinese Communist Party police station investigations that supposedly the RCMP continues. We don't have any results in court. It's the story of underground casino networks, which I've reported on at the Bureau.news, and how these connect to the very same people that allegedly fund election interference for China, the same people that are tasked to corrupt Canadian political candidates, the same people that are used as what's called in China white gloves or insulation to be stood up in the community and run these Chinese police stations, where they're taking directions from essentially a high-level Chinese police officer in their home province in China, and they on the ground in Canada are tasked, whether they be a business person that owns grocery stores across Canada and launders money under the table. They're being tasked to monitor the community. Make no mistake, that is the story of China's interference in Canada.
That's incredible. I understand that in the United States, there were a handful of these Chinese police stations, and police have taken action. I understand there's been some prosecutions, but you're saying nothing has formally happened in Canada? Is that what you're saying?
Nothing has formally happened. I'll break down the answer into two parts. We heard in the Hogue Commission that one of these, purportedly diaspora community service stations in the Montreal area was really being used as one of these surveillance posts by the Chinese state, which uses proxies in the community to, they were even getting funding from Canada to offer
supposed... Come on.
They were Ezra, it's on the record. They're getting funding from Canada to offer services to immigrants, purportedly to help them integrate into Canada, where the RCMP, the Mounties, even in evidence said what's really happening is by giving those services, that's an operation. They're using that to monitor the community, and much of the community knows it. So what happened here is that, it came out in the Hogue Commission a diaspora group said, hey, look, Mounties, why are you not treating this like the organized crime that it is? If this was the Hells Angels running a station for some corrupt politician, you'd charge them. It's the same thing, but in the Chinese community. And all the RCMP is doing was sort of publicly disrupting. And at that, they get criticized by people like Trudeau appointed Senator Yuan Paowu for supposedly intervening in, legit community services. It's absurd what is happening in Canada. But to your point, yes, in the United States, where they have real functioning law, where they have real motivated counterintelligence that's there to protect diaspora citizens wherever they're from, because they're more exposed to these networks you speak of, whether they're from Russia, Iran, China. In the US, they have a number of prosecutions. People have been convicted. And look, China is so brazen. And as I say, what they do is try to flood the zone of the country that they're trying to influence. So even with those prosecutions in the United States, they now have none other than the New York Times reported on a pop-up service station in New York City run by a local gangster. So China won't stop. At least in the US, they're hitting that whack-a-mole with a few hammers.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.